Good morning, everybody. This is my second last talk. It's getting better and better for me, at least. And the big surprise of today, and you know, there has been a kind of honey war going on between Denmark and Ireland, and it seems so that we have accomplished. Now, this morning, a gentleman, he did not give me a jar of honey, but he allowed me to taste the Irish honey. So that's the first time in my life I have been tasting Irish honey. Later on, a lady turned up, gave me a very nice jar of honey, and just a few seconds ago, I got one on my own. So now I do believe that you have bees that are able to produce honey. Yeah, I mean, you never know what's going on. So breeding super bees, this is really, oh yeah, Superman. Between the lines it says, let's breed as good bees as possible, and breeding bees is very, very important to make an efficient beekeeping, to keep your beekeeping running, to manage your bees in a very easy way. So that's what we're going to take a look at, and it's really more the Danish method of how do we breed and how did we do it, and I'm sure that the breeder organizations in your country do it approximately in the same way, maybe a bit different, and I would be very happy to discuss the differences that we are going on. And just let's get right to the point. This is noisy. What we found out in Danish beekeeping is if you want to have 500 colonies, you can't spend time on getting swarms down from the trees. You can't use time on trying to do some kind of management things into the colony. To put it another way, if you have a colony that's not going into swarm condition during a season, you could take care of 10 colonies of that type in the same time as you're using on taking care of a colony that's going into swarm condition. That's at least a Danish interpretation of swarming. The other thing is that if a colony is getting into swarming conditions, it really stops to collect honey, it really stops to develop. I agree on that if you have had a flow, very late flow, it might make sense splitting a colony into two so that it does build up during the season. And I also have to admit that in Germany they have this very nice Carnica bees, and in Germany they have really never, as far as I can see, been concerned about swarming, because they just make splits every May. So if you take a colony and you split it in two in May, you really have taken the swarming tendency out of the colony. But we don't make splits in Denmark. I mean, we have a colony, that one has to be running through the season to show us what the potential of that colony is. Otherwise, I mean, we're not working on the genetic side of it. And this is how we do it in Denmark. I would be happy to explain it to you. So when we go out and we open up the colonies, let's say every second week or something like that, we run through the colony if it's breeding work that we're working with, and we just check out, is there any kind of swarm cells in the colony. And if they're during the season, you never get any kind of eggs into the swarm cells. It's getting the best grading, which is 5 in Denmark. So a note on the paper, and then you know when you were there, no problems, nothing. Then we have another nice thing actually that has developed over the years. So you come out there is a swarm cell in, and there's eggs in, but we don't do anything. We don't care, because we have been breeding for a low swarming tendency over so many years that even if there's eggs in there, we don't expect that they would go into the swarming condition. So we don't do anything. If it has been like that, okay, you're running to the colonies, there are swarm cells, there are eggs in there, but you really don't do any kind of management into the colony to prevent swarming, then they get the note 4. And then we get down to the note 3, which is we have eggs in the swarm cell, I really, as a beekeeper, feel that I should do something. That could be just remove the swarm cell. It could be putting empty frames into the brood just to give plenty of room to the colony. Then we are really down to the node 3, but still the bees, they should not swarm. Eggs in the cells, the larvae are feed, and you really think, I have to do something, otherwise the bees will be up in the tree. We're really getting down to, a very, very low node, which is 2. That's not good. That one is already out of business for breeding. And luckily, once in a while it happens that a colony is swarming, then we are getting rid of that queen, and it's definitely not going into the breeding program. Another thing is that we found out that if you really have to fight bees all the time, if you could go to an apiary and you can work very fast with the colonies without really having much protection on. The discussion about having protection on, yes or no, is a totally different discussion, because people should protect themselves, because bee sting could be dangerous to people. So we really have to have that in mind. But if you're a skilled beekeeper and you have been working with bees for many years, again, we found out that if you have very gentle bees, you could handle 200 colonies in the same times as we handled 100 colonies in the good old days. So this is really just a matter of running and being very fast at handling the bees. And how do we judge this? This is, we call it temper. And in Denmark, it's very important. If you want to give your breeding queens the very best node, you have to run through the colony without use of smoker. I know that's a bit difficult, because it's really, it's really something that is built into a beekeeper. Everybody likes to, doing this. This is a very good feeling. But really, when we're working on breeding queens, they should be handled without the use of smoke. If you go into the colony and you do give them smoke, and this is just a picture for the photographer, there is far way too much smoke that he's putting into the colony, but it did look good at that day. So if you go out there and you put on your smoker and you put smoke into the colony, and you do handle the colonies without, and you don't get stung or something like that, then it can get the node 4. And then we're really getting now down to the nasty things. Here we are talking about, if you work with the bees, you're getting 1 to 3 stings unprovoked. Did you see last day? I did provoke the bees somehow. I really got a bee in between my finger and the box. That's not the fault of the bees, that's the beekeeper fault. So 1 to 3 stings, that happens once in a while, that we see that one is out of the breeding program. And if we are getting down to this, which means 4 to 10 stings, that's nasty. That's really nasty. Then you really go back and you get your bee suit, and then we will kill the queen later on. And if you're getting down here, just lots of sting, and it should not really, in a country like Denmark, where we are so dense populated there, the bees are always very close to human beings, and we should not have bees doing like that. I will show you on tomorrow some pictures from Scotland where the bees are extremely aggressive, but somewhere out in the mountains on the heather, it doesn't hurt any people at all. This is just one fun picture down here. This is some years ago. They made the Danish championship in producing nukes, and the weather was really nasty that day. Thunder was coming, it was very heavy, everybody had a headache. That means that the bees are really not happy. First, you can see, I don't know if you can see it, but at the beginning, the people who were watching this championship, they disappeared, and finally the beekeepers, they really had to escape away from that. This is, nobody wants to have bees like that, at least not in Denmark. And then another very important thing, and I'm really looking on this on a kind of commercial way. If you go down to a box, if you go down to a box, the bees should stay in the box. My fingers, they have to work here on the frames, and I don't want to move bees all the time. They should stay down in the box, they should not go up on the top bar, so I can handle the bees without problems. that makes it much faster. And then the next thing is that we really prefer that the bees, they stay on the frame, that they move gentle on the frame, because if the bees are moving gentle on the frames, it's very easy to recognize, are there eggs in, where are the queen, are there larvae in, are there sealed brood into the colony. And again, you're working much faster in that way with your colonies. And just here, this is really maybe, you know, sometimes breeding you can breed too good. So what happened up here is that to get the best node, the bees, they have to be very calm. As I said, the bees are moving gently, slowly on the frames. And then the next thing is, that's the shaking thing that I was talking about a few days ago, that if you shake the bees off, I mean, the bees should be like that. If you give them a gentle shake, they should fall off. We did, over a time span of 10 years, breed so much on calm bees that we could really not get the bees off the frame. So we really had to change this node. So working for that they should be easy to get off the frame. Calm, yeah, they're moving slowly, they're doing well. Down here on tree, the bees are a little restless on the frames, but they do not fly up. Only if you shake the bees off the frame, you get some kind of activity around your head. And if we go down to the next lowest node, which means 2, the bees are very nervous, the bees are really running on the frames, and bees are really flying up. I don't know if you can see, this is the Scottish gentleman I visited some years ago. They were pretty easy to find the queen, because the only bee in the box, I think, was the queen. But again, I really respect the Scottish beekeepers, because they could really prove me that the bees there, they are producing honey. And that's a great argument in my life. Do we get honey or do we not get honey? And that was my big concern about Ireland. And then down here you get the very nervous bees, and yeah, you know, it's like this here. So that's how we are judging the bees in the beginning of the 80s, when we started really doing queen breeding in Denmark. And then of course, this is extremely important. I know all beekeepers are always talking about beekeeping is very nice, except this greasy substance that we always have to extract out of the colony. But honestly, everybody, if my colony, I do have the same feeling, but if they are on 5 boxes, I will get the honey home and I will get it sold. So that's the main aim. Look at this frame here. It's a very nice brood frame that we have in those colonies here. Great bees. Just to tell you that you always see these brown boxes here, these styropor boxes. There are lots of other boxes. It just seems so that the very skilled beekeepers in Denmark, they tend to have those ones, but there are other ones. Yeah, and then we really get into a situation like these 2 old beekeepers. This is the guy I presented, and maybe it's on here a bit later. That's the guy who's harvesting lots of honey. I mean, if you have to have stairs when you're getting out there, it might be that we have been breeding a bit too good. But still, we will get it home. Oh yeah, here is. I know you guys are tired of this. And again, I just have to tell you that this guy, he was harvesting 65 kilos over 20 years, and he's an exception. So I don't harvest that much honey. So we really managed to have extremely nice bees working with, extremely easy to work with, handle very fast, but we have forgotten one thing in the Kingdom of Denmark, which was diseases. And that's because if we have an environment that is pretty good, and we had that in the period of the 80s, we had winter rape and we had summer rape. There was always some kind of flowers available for the bees, and if the bees, they are getting fed good, they're really not getting sick. So certainly something happened down in the European Union about the subsidies to the production of summer rape, and certainly the summer rape disappeared out of the country in 1 year's time. And then we had this period of what I call desert time. Somebody said that you have the same here in Ireland, you just use another word, but it's really a time span over 3 weeks where the bees really don't get anything to feed on, and then they're getting, let's say, into a kind of stressful situation. And if you're getting stressed, you know that, everybody, then you're getting sick, maybe, if you're not very strong. So what we found out during that period was actually that Nosema maybe was the biggest problem that we had in our colonies. If we did out and took samples for Nosema, we found out that 80% of the colonies in Denmark, they somehow had Nosema in the colonies. And it really can take your colony back. The development is going slow in the springtime. And this is not, maybe it's not such a nice film, but just to show you what we did, we found a place in Denmark where together with them, we developed a way in a digital way, to analyze samples for Nosema. So what we do is that we go out in the springtime, because that's where Nosema is on its highest, and we take out samples from all the colonies, all the potential colonies. This, what you have over here, is a freeze box, and this is, to keep it cold, just to kill the bees as fast as possible or to calm them down. So we go out to the boxes and we take samples from all the potential breeding colonies, which is very important for us. This is, I just listened to what I'm saying something in Danish there, and then I'm complaining about that this colony in the first week of April is not that strong. You can see empty frames here, but now the bees are coming, so it's at least on 8 frames at that time of the year, which is okay for Denmark. Then we take frames up. In the same time, I'm somehow checking, is the colony okay? Is there eggs in? And the way we do it is just, we take a honey jar like that. This is really a Danish honey jar. You could take smaller containers. And you just, go on the neck on the bees. And if you take it like that, the bees, they'll just roll over and down to the container, which is a pretty easy way to take a sample. The big challenge there is that we only need 60 bees for this analyzing. And I have once taken 300 bees out of a colony, and you don't want to kill 100 and 240 bees just because of getting a sample like that. Then you have to take it home and put it into the freezer for, I think I write 12 hours there. I would prefer that you use 12 hours in the freezer to kill the bees. Because it has happened that we have been sending samples to this place, and when they open up the envelope, there are bees all over, and they're not happy about that. This is not really a government institution or something like that. That's a school where they have beekeeping on their program, and it was a pretty good activity. They do every year analyze, I would say, more than 1,000 samples for us. They do it pretty fast, and the other thing is it's pretty. They do it pretty fast, and it's pretty cheap. I would say approximately €4 per sample. So there you can see I have my samples down here. Take it out, and then I just count 60 bees for the sample, and then I do send it to this place. If you guys have to do that, you have to find somewhere to do it. I know that there are people from Germany and Sweden and Norway that they do send their samples down to this place here. I'm pretty sure that officially there would be some problems. Sending dead bees over. You do it by yourself? Okay, great. That's great. That's great. But if you are a beekeeper having 200 samples, you don't want to do it by yourself. But it's great. Yeah, and I know, I'm sure they're teaching that on a workshop over here. Great, well done. Yeah, okay. Maybe I should try it later on then. It's just more to show you how we do it. This is very easy for us, just into an envelope, and then it's sent out. And this is a very, very important parameter during the years in Danish beekeeping. I would like to show you in a second what we have achieved doing this. Yeah, it's going to the lab test, and it's just analyzing this in a digital way. And this is what you can see. This is since 1991, and I could have put this up to date, but you know, updating the graphic every year. But it's really the same tendency that at that time here, 80% of all the Danish colonies, they had Nosema in the springtime. So at the moment where we just did this, I mean, this is very simple what we did here. Just selecting on breeding queens that do not have Nosema in the springtime. Look what happened. Now it is 80 to 90% of all Danish colonies that do not have Nosema in the springtime. This is great. Well done. I mean, and now it's getting even more exciting because you know that we do have Nosema apis. That's the good old Nosema thing that we have. But over the years we have been talking about that there is a new, much more aggressive Nosema turning up that we call Nosema serrana. This is really funny because they think it came from Asia to Europe. Later on they found out it came from Europe to Asia and then back again. So it should not, it's pretty much the wrong name. Again, this is just one of our big queen breeders who gave me his results, and he had the results back to 1998, and you can see at the beginning quite a lot of the bees did have Nosema, and over the years we are really up on the top level where this is 100% in the biological sense, you know, things happens. So that's pretty good. And in the beginning of the 90s, it certainly turned out that we started to get more American foul brood in Denmark. As you can see down here, this is 49, and this up here is approximately 2,000. In the good old days, it was really nice. We had up to 500 cases of American foul brood in Denmark. So it was pretty heavy. I mean, the bee inspectors, they had good time there because they met once in a while, 1 or 2 weeks, and the old guys there, they went out to the beekeepers and they said, burning, alive, keep alive, burning, 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 and then they were drinking beer the whole night, and this was a great time for them. The big success here, really, the decrease is also due to the new management, I mean, exchanging combs in the colonies. I'm pretty sure that's why we went down. I'm also sure that, of course, beekeepers are getting more skilled. We were at that time getting fewer beekeepers, so the density of bees were getting lower. And then we went down to, in the 65, in the 60s, to a pretty stable level. It's in the 70s we went totally down. So here, but certainly something happened in the beginning of the 90s. We really got more cases of American foul brood. And we really had to think about what's going on out there now. And you can see this, you know, I like this one here. So I was just calculating on when would we get back to the 50 level of American foul brood, and then maybe we should meet again and drink beer and kill bee colonies. So we really had to take a decision. We have not been focusing enough on the hygienic side of the bees. We have really not been focusing on other diseases in our colonies because it has really not been a problem over the years. And it turned out pretty clear that since we have so many buckfast bees in Denmark, that we could get back, when we analyzed where did we have the American foul brood, if we did get back to the beekeepers, it turned out that we really had a few lines of buckfast bees that much easier got American foul brood than the other ones. And then we got the beekeeping lab in Denmark to make some tests, and that was Hansen and Brøsgaard back in 2002. That did, at that time, this was very nice and very neat what they did. I mean, they had these small containers here, and they put small larvae. They were grafting this, and they did feed them, and they really succeeded in getting the larvae to develop and to survive, and they really got live bees out of that. That was a heavy work because the success was pretty low at the beginning. I know today they're doing this much better. So what did they do? So they had this larvae in here, and then they did feed them with different concentrations of spore loads into the into the feed of them. And here we got very clear results. We had, on Denmark at that time, we had an island where we kept American foul brood just for scientific use. We had, and it was yellow bees, and they have really been surviving on that small island. I mean, they had to change colonies out over the years, but they really did breed for that. And you could see here, this is the yellow bee, and they needed 8.4 spores per larva, and then 50% of the larvae, they would die because of that. It's not much, 8 spores, but this is really done in the lab, so it might be very different out in real life. And then they took a line of what we call normal yellow bees, I mean, that were for commercial sale in Denmark. And here it turned out that one actually just needed 1 spore to get 50% of the larvae to die. And then we had this suspicious buckfast line that there was something going out, and that one really did get American foul brood, in my advisor interpretation, just if some spores were passing by the colony out there. And this really tells us that American foul brood, of course, does have something to do with the management. It really has something to do with how you run your bees, but it definitely does have something to do with the genetics of the bees. This, without doubt. So we really had to focus on that. The buckfast breeders in Denmark, there were 2 or 3 suspicious lines. They got all killed. I mean, we didn't want to have them into our breeding program. Another nice thing done by Henrik Hansen and Brødsgaard at an earlier time was that on this island we really had lots and lots of loads of American foul brood. So what they tried to do was that they took colonies. What they did is every time we found a colony with American foul brood in Denmark, they really did count and calculate how many spores were there into the colony. And it turned out that you should really have a pretty heavy load of spores into a big colony just before they started to die off out of it. But again, we saw that then we had colonies where pretty low spore load, and they got American foul brood. And then we had other ones where you really had to have an enormous amount of spores into the colony before something happens. So genetic is definitely the case. And this is another, I would say, funny thing for Denmark. Then they tried to look at the different types of American foul brood that they have in Denmark. Again, they did some kind of genetic analysis on it, and it really turned out that American foul brood is not just American foul brood. In Denmark we find 7 different types of American foul brood, and now this is getting very exciting now, because we could see that the aggressiveness of the different types of American foul brood were also very different. So we did have this type of American foul brood, your colony would just die out right away. And then we really have some types of American foul brood where the bees do survive over several years. So again, there we have a problem. And the same with chock brood. This was done by Annette Brun Jensen from the University of Copenhagen. With chock brood we have 14 different types of chock brood in Denmark. Chock brood is not the most serious disease, but still this is a bit interesting what's going on there. Yeah, you can see it here. No, you can't see it, but that's chock brood. Sorry. So the big aim for us is that we really had to get into this business breeding for disease tolerance. Otherwise, Danish beekeeping would not be a success on the long move. And I mean, this is not something that we have invented in Denmark. It's really invented by Rudenbuller in the US and by other Marla Spivak and so on and so on. It's just nice for me to present what we are doing in Denmark. So it's a pretty old knowledge. Breeding tolerant bees, main issue over the last 15 years in Denmark. That's the. Oh yeah. So how do we do this? Yeah, we do test our bees for hygienic behavior, and we do it in 2 different ways. I have to say this is the fast way, what we call the pin test. And the point is actually, you go into a colony and you kill some of the brood, and then you leave that brood into the colony again, and then you really observe how good are the bees at opening up the sealed cell and removing the dead bees in there. That's the same as saying the bees, are they able to find the disease and are they able to remove the disease out of the colony. Here you can see this is the pin test. I just show you how I'm doing that. You really have to find a brood area that's pretty nice. This is not perfect, but that's what I did. What I found 2 weeks ago, I think something like that. And then we are using insect pins or needles of the size 0, 0. And then you really just take the needle and then you push it down into the sealed brood, and you really have to have this feeling, killing. You will get the feeling into your finger. And this is just to show you how we do it. You take and pin 50 cells, and when you have done that, you mark it, and then after 12 hours you go back to the colony, and then you observe how are the bees doing. Yeah, always mark where it is, otherwise you're using too much time finding the frame where it has happened. And how are we doing there? I don't remember. Can you see it? Where did yeah, it's down there. You can see down here, after 12 hours, this is a colony with a pretty poor hygienic behavior that should never get into a breeding program, because they're not doing that in a good way. Yeah, here you can see it close up. You can actually see where the pin has gone in the cells. And if you don't do it in the right way, I mean, if you don't put the pin in the middle, you really don't kill the larvae down there. And once in a while, beekeepers have told me, this is a good one. You can see all the ones here are totally empty out. There you can see that's the 50 cells, and in this way I really can calculate how good are the bees at removing dead brood. This is the freeze test used mainly by the commercial Danish queen breeders. I have really tried to convince them to go to the pin test, but you know, if beekeepers just have started to use a method, they will never change. So you go into the colony, you find a nice piece of brood, and you take 10 times 10 cells, you cut it out, and here, can anybody recognize the mistake here? I forgot to take into consideration where the wires are. So you can really see I'm pushing hard for this, just to get the knife through the wires. And I mean, you don't want to spoil the wires, so do it between 2 wires when you're cutting this out. Yeah, I have to do it once again. I mean, if the wires wouldn't have been there, I think there's one, yeah. So if you did it between the wires, it would be much faster. This is more time consuming, because you really have to go out to the colony, you have to find some brood, you have to cut it out, you have to number it, you have to put it back to the freezer for 24 hours, and then you have to go out again. If you just use the pin test, you just use that right away, and then you only have to go out there once. But you know, convincing beekeepers is not always as easy as you would expect. Yeah, we have to go away to the freezer there for 24 hours, freeze it for 24 hours. We have had situations where the beekeepers did put all the brood samples very closely together, and then we found out that the ones in the middle, they were not really dead. So we will have to be successful, you have to be sure that the brood is really killed. Here you go back again, and then you put the brood back to the colony. We have made a minor change in Denmark because of the big queen breeders, so they really do produce in a colony at home very nice brood frames, and then they just cut lots of sections out there so that they have to go out there twice. And when you put that in here, you really have to do it gentle and nicely, otherwise if it starts to bend or something like that, it might mishappen. After 48 hours now, which is 2 days, which is very often very nice for the beekeepers, because then they can put in the frozen brood on one day, and then 2 days later they can control it. Where is it? It's there. I'll just put the frame on the template on in a second, and there you can see this one is really not doing good. I have to admit that's the same one with the pin test, so it does fit pretty nicely. That you can see they have not removed the dead brood in here, and we are very hard on this. You can see this one is emptied out. Let's say 80%, doesn't count as cleaned out. It does not. So we're down here on, let's say, 80-90% hygienic behavior. Oh, and what has happened since we started with this is actually that we have managed, this is the percentage out here, this is the years, 2000, 2011, we are doing this on approximately 500 colonies a year, and you can see we have really raised the hygienic behavior of the Danish bees quite a lot, and we are still increasing on that, and we're still having focus on it. Due to Mahler's Biwak, we right at the moment do have in mind, should we go down, instead of 48 hours, should we go down on 24 hours, because we now do have too many breeder queens that really are cleaning out to 100%. So when we're selecting, we really would want to have the top 5 of all of them. And if we're getting too many of them, are cleaning everything out, you have a problem. And here you can see what happens, and this is, again, this is that's me saying this, but again, American Foul Brood Denmark, you remember that, it was doing like that. After we started this work, you can see that the number of American Foul Brood cases in Denmark is down on a very, very low level. I mean, it's something like 20 to 30 cases a year, and it has been decreasing all the year, and I'm pretty sure that's just because of the breeding work that we have been doing. So that's great. And then the Beekeeper Association is doing something different, or something, I mean, we're making, what do you call that, a customer test. So all the queen breeders there, they are selling queens, and we have asked them to send 10 queens into the Beekeeper Association, each of them, and then we do distribute the queens out to beekeepers, normal beekeepers, and then they will run the whole test under what I call normal beekeeper condition, how you are managing your queens. And in this way also we are in pretty close contact to the commercial beekeepers, and we constantly have a discussion now on where are we at the moment with the breeding work that we're doing in Denmark. And again, this is really what we're testing for: honey production, swarming, timber, comb behavior, nosema, hygienic behavior, and we do not accept chock brood in the colonies. And here you can see this is the test apiaries from last year, distributed more or less all over the country. We try to get very skilled beekeepers, and we try to get different types of beekeepers, so we are getting it tested under different conditions. But last year we had 14 queen breeders in Denmark, which is pretty good. That these guys are producing approximately 75% of all the queens in Denmark, and they all, I mean, in each apiary last year there were 14 queens in each apiary, and they really are getting tested. Just to show you a bit, this is from one of the test apiaries that in 2002 we had 1 Carnica, we had 2 Ligustica, and we had 6 Buckfast, and that's approximately the same over the years. The Buckfast people are really the dominant ones, and you might ask, why don't we have the black beekeepers in here? Because they're really not producing bees commercially for the country. And then into our Beekeeper magazine we really get the results, so all beekeepers can really go in, pick out where do we have the best beekeepers or the best queen breeders in Denmark. And I have to say, this is really, I mean, you really have to be strong, because you are running the risk being the last guy in the judgment of how good the queens are. And again, here you can see the honey production. If you're looking on the bars here, if they're getting over the neighbor bar, they are not significant different from each other, but still, I mean, this guy here, and this is relatively which means in percentage. But this beekeeper here, he's really 40%, he's really performing 40% better than the other queen breeders, or the average of the queen breeders. And again, we put it into the Beekeeper magazine. You can't see it here, and here you really can go in, and then you could see, okay, I'm living in a town. I do have many very sensible neighbors, so I really don't want having the bees that they should swarm. Then I just go in here, and then I find the ones who have the low swarming tendency, or maybe I am a commercial beekeeper. I really want to work with I really want to give a high honey harvest. Then you should go in and maybe get queens from this guy here, and so on and so on. You really can go in on the individual level and see what suits you as a beekeeper best. Yeah, we're getting back to this one all the time, aren't we? It's really because we are not on that level yet, but we really in the future have to work on Varroa tolerance. And this is really something nice. I met this guy in Austria. His name was Alois Wallner, and we are back in 1992. And this guy, he really said that when he was looking at the mites when they're falling down on the insert, he could see that the bees somehow did defend themselves, that they somehow did remove the mites from the colony, and that they did bite into them. And very nicely, I call it the IBRA office over there, there's a young Irish girl who has been doing exactly the same as this guy he did some years ago. There's very nice work what she has done over there. Go over there and take a look if it's still there. You can see the results, you can see the mites, and so on. So what are we doing in Denmark? Always, we just import the bees there, because this guy, he claims that he had tolerant bees. So we did breed it into the Danish lines, and after pretty fast we found out that it was really not tolerant under Danish conditions. And really here we have to take a step to the side, because I'm pretty sure that you can make a certain kind of tolerance on the local ecotype of mites and the local ecotype of bees that you have in your area, and it does fit for you. But as soon as you just remove it to the other part, distant part, it might not work. Another thing is, you have heard about that Primorsky bees in Russia, very far distance. You have Denmark here, and you have the Primorsky over here. And the story that has been told was that the beekeepers in that area, they really didn't know what this little tiny mite was, and they really didn't have the knowledge to fight. So they lost nearly all the bees, but there were bees back. And they got imported to the US, and they did quite a lot of work on it. We did it imported to Denmark again, illegal, I have to say. I did not do it. But again, as soon as you do transport it to other places, it really doesn't work. And then we had this project, I told you about it, on a small island in Sweden, invented by Ingemar Friis there. And what they did was that they took 150 colonies to the island, and they did not treat them at all. After a year, they were only down to 146, and no, sorry, this is the number of colonies, yeah. And what you can see out here is, what is it? That's the mortality, of course, yeah. And in the first year, when you put the bees out there and you don't treat them, not many of them are dying. Year number 2, more are dying, and in year number 3, you really had this nuclear mite bomb happening on that island. But still, they kept the bees running, and there are still bees today that are alive on this island. They're not doing well. One of the main reasons why they're doing well is swarming, because they remove the swarms as soon as are swarming on the island. But pretty interesting that we can find places where they do have bees that are surviving over a longer time. This is from Yves Leconte in France, who he got told all the time that there are bees alive in the chimney, there are bees alive somewhere there and up far distance, and the beekeeper, he died many years ago, but the bees are still alive in his colonies. So what they did was that they wrote to the France beekeepers asking them, do you have something like that? And then they collected all the bees there, and they have them on some apiaries, and they're not getting treated, and they are also surviving. Extremely aggressive, extremely low production, extremely small colonies, but it's pretty exciting that it does happen. And again, Marla Spivak here from the US, he's really the big hygienic behavior person in the world. I did show this a few days ago again here. You can see when they're working on bees with very high hygienic behavior, you can see over here, this is from one apiary, this is the number of mites, which is pretty low. This is a commercial available queens that have a much higher number of mites in them. It's the same case here, it's the same case here, and as I told you a few days ago, and then since we're working with biology, we also have an apiary where it's opposite. That's how it is. But this is really not the total tolerance. It might be that's only, let's say, a 10% tolerance to the mites. But I mean, if we make 5% here, 5% treatment, 5% there, we're really getting to the point at the end. Yeah. Again, here you can see that this down here is bees having a very good hygienic behavior, and this over here shows how many mites did you find on the adult bees, and you can see the better the hygienic behavior is, the lower the number of mites. And over here you have exactly the same where it's on the worker brood. So hygienic behavior is extremely important in modern beekeeping as far as I can see it. And what they have been doing there at Marla Spivak is having these hygienic bees, and then they go in to the brood, and then they really are looking on how are the mites, are they reproductive in the brood. And again here you can see the hygienic bees. You can see the green one, it's how many are reproductive in the cells. Over here you can see the controls that are not hygienic, that a large higher proportion of the bees are reproductive there. So it's really worthwhile working with it. And then the last one, which is very encouraging, it's this is on New Zealand. No, sorry. On Gotland. They really call that project over there for the James Bond project, which means if either you survive or you're dead. That's pretty clear work. I mean, they don't do anything. And it's certainly a guy with the name John Kiefoos, he turned up in France and he said, what you guys are doing on Gotland, I have been doing in France for several years. And he's a commercial beekeeper, and he's a very interesting guy. So what he claims that he has not been treating his colonies now for 15 years. I also have to say that he has really been doing the big crash over the years, because if you don't treat, you lose colonies, and you lose a high proportion of your colonies. But I mean, this is really the right way of evolution. The best way of getting tolerant bees here in Ireland would be nobody is treating. And then in 5 years' time we would have 10 colonies left in the country. And I mean, that's not going to happen. It's not, we can't do that, but that's really the way. So he has what he called a soft bond test, where it means that he has 500 colonies, they're more or less treated, but you really go in and then you judge them on honey production, temper, swarming, all the things that I have been talking about. And then you find, let's say, the 100 best ones of them, you go in there and then you make hygienic behavior tests on hundreds of them, and then you take the 40 best of them, and then you go in there and then you look on the mite load in the colony, how many mites you have in there, and then you take the 20 best of them, and then you go into the cells and then you see how reproductive are the mites in there, and then it turns out that you have 4 or 5 colonies who are doing pretty good. I have been down there, I have been visiting him. I thought in the beginning, this guy, he's a liar. But I think he is doing well. At least I think he's on the right track. It seems so that aggressive bees, they're more varroa tolerant than gentle bees. So when we went into his apiary, we got stung, all of us. So he's not so happy. This is down at Toulouse in the southern part of France. He's really doing a big work. He's really making lots of notes. He's really counting mites. Enormous amount of notes he's putting into this. Here you can see this is a picture I've photographed from his computer. That's what he's doing during the winter time, where he's running through all the brood and pieces of brood to see how are the mites doing there. And again, hygienic behavior. I don't know if you can see, this is the number of colonies they have out here, and this is the hygienic behavior up here. And he does have quite a big number of colonies who are doing very well in the hygienic behavior test. That was my talk about breeding super bees, and we should really go for it. It's a big work, and I really can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, but somebody has to do it, somebody has to work on that. That's going to be the future, so that we don't have to use, unwanted chemicals into our colonies. This is the way. I can't promise there will be lots of you who will never be able to see this happening for this, because we're talking about a very, very long time span.